Bipin Desai, pictured at an earlier hearing, walked free from court today. A High Court judge has ordered a jury to clear a chemist of murder after he gave his elderly father a lethal dose of morphine. Bipin Desai, 59, walked free from court after hearing Mr. Justice Green praise his kindness and compassion over the death of 85-year-old father at their family home. He denied murdering his father but admitted assisting in a suicide and was allowed home with just a 9-month jail sentence suspended for 9 months. The judge ruled that a murder trial involving Desai should be halted despite hearing how he helped his father end his life with a smoothie laced with stolen morphine. The jury had earlier heard how Desai poured the painkiller into a drink for his father, whose body was later found at their £1.2 million home in Farnham, Surrey. Desai checked on elderly Dheeraj Lal Desai 5 minutes after kissing him goodnight and then injected him with insulin as he slept, the jury had heard. The pharmacist was 2 weeks into a murder trial when Mr. Justice Green ruled that his father had wanted to die and instructed the jury to offer not guilty verdicts. The jury had already heard that Desai admitted assisting in a suicide and 2 charges of theft by an employee, relating to the insulin and morphine. Sentencing him, Mr. Justice Green described the theft as trivial and indicated that the sentencing was only for the assisted suicide. Related articles previous. 1 Next. Game over for Tom Raider. Retired IT manager, 72, is banned. Madeleine shop assistant, 33, splashed £200,000 on 5-star. Share this article. Share script dm.later, bundle, function, if, dm.rotator, new dm.rotator, p20, page size, 1, page count, 1.0, active class, active, rotate, false, $, number p20.share, .on, click, function, dms.facebook.post related. He said, in your mind that was part of your responsibilities as your father's carer, to perform this final act of assistance, kindness, and compassion. He added, your acts of assistance were acts of pure compassion and mercy. Your father had a solid and firm wish to die. For him, being assisted to die would be fulfilling his wish of going to heaven to see his wife and being put out of his misery. The jury had earlier heard how Desai poured the painkiller into a drink for his father, whose body was later found at their £1.2 million home in Farnham, Surrey, pictured. He continued, the ripple effects of having been wrongfully accused of murder have been profound and extremely severe. He said, the thefts are trivial and only form part of the fabric of the wider case. The owner of the pharmacy said in his evidence that you were an honest, respectful, and decent man. He cared not for the small bottle of concentrated morphine solution or morph or the small amount of insulin. He added, you are free to now go with your family and start the process of rebuilding your life. Ordeal is finally over. Speaking after being cleared of murder, Mr. Desai said, the past 2 years have been a time of immense stress for our entire family and it is huge relief that this ordeal is finally over. I have been greatly moved by the enormous support I have had from my family, friends, colleagues, and neighbors, to whom I will always be grateful. We now want to start to put our lives back together and to grieve for my father, who we called Bapuji. Desai was acquitted of murder after his defense barristers Natasha Wong QC and Michael Field argued that the prosecution case was so weak no reasonable jury could properly convict. The defense made their formal application at the close of the prosecution case on Tuesday, but it can only be reported today for legal reasons. Desai's solicitor, Kishori Kachapau, from Freeman's Solicitors, said outside court, this is a very sad case. Dozens and dozens of people came forward to give us character references, attesting to Mr. Desai's compassion and love for his father. Many of them came to court to offer their support. The court had already heard how the elderly Desai made repeated attempts for help in ending his life following the recent deaths of his wife and dog. Defending, Natasha Wong QC said, the reality, in this case, is a very sad situation because what we have is a man who wanted to die, not because he was terribly ill but, sadly, because he had just had enough of life and there are no real authorities who deal with that situation. A letter to the judge, written by Desai's wife of 29 years, Bipin Desai, was read out to Guildford Crown Court by Ms. Wang, which explained that her husband had tried to commit suicide himself on several occasions. Since August 2015 our lives have been turned completely upside down and have never been the same for any of us, she read. We have seen Desai completely crumble before our eyes. She continued, the boys and I have had to watch Bipin shrink to a shell who struggles to communicate with anyone. He has no joy in his life, he is just existing, not living. She said, we are asking for Bipin to recover his health and start the process of grieving for his father, which he has been unable to do. Ms. Wang also read a statement written by Desai's eldest son Nichil which revealed he had also been asked for help with the elderly man's suicide. I have lost my grandfather, a man who I loved, she read. To have him ask for help to go up was the worst experience of my life. She continued, my father is a completely changed father from the man he was in early 2015. We can barely get him to communicate with us these days. Desai's autistic son Samir begged the judge not to imprison his father in another statement, again read to the court by Ms. Wang. If you truly love someone you want to ease their suffering, she read. My dad is the best person I know. He was left with an impossible choice and chose the road which gave my grandfather peace. He didn't think of himself in this and that is my dad, always thinking of others before himself. The court heard Mr. Desai bought the morphine mixture from Von James Pharmacy, pictured, where he worked in February last year, before carrying out the murder in August. He's already had his dad taken away from him, please don't take our dad away from us. In his judgment that the prosecution had insufficient evidence of murder, Mr. Justice Green said, the defendant's evidence in interview was that his father had grown weary of life following the death of his wife, whom he doted upon, in 2003 and the death of his dog, whom he also adored, in 2010. He added, he was a firm believer in the afterlife. He had repeatedly and insistently beseeched and asked the defendant for assistance to die. He generally articulated this in Gujarati. He spoke of wanting to go to heaven to see his wife and dog. He wanted to go upstairs, he had had enough of life. He had communicated this to the defendant at Christmas 2014 and asked for help then or just after in 2014. Over the circa 6 months leading up to August 2015, during which time the father had been living with the defendant and his family, he had become increasingly persistent and insistent. He continued, he asked almost every day for help. He said to the defendant that he should get him some dawa, which Gujarati for medicine, to send him to sleep. He had had a good life, now was the time to see his wife. I reject the prosecution submission that this account is uncorroborated. Judge who sparked fury after ruling NHS should fund HIV wonder drug. Sir Nicholas Green QC made headlines last year after he ruled a preventative treatment for HIV should be funded by the NHS. Mr. Justice Green ruled in favour of the National AIDS Trust, NAT, who brought a challenge against NHS England in August 2016. NHS England has long argued it did not have the power to fund the treatment because it was a preventative drug, and the responsibility to provide it should fall to local authorities. However, the drug is currently used in America, Canada, Australia, and France, protecting the most at-risk gay men. The ruling was broadly welcomed by leading medical organisations and MPs, who said it was ethical and would save many lives. But critics today voiced outrage given the drugs would cost the NHS £20 million a year if introduced. The decision sparked a row among campaigners who believed it might lead to irresponsible sexual behaviour and will use up vital funds at a time when life-prolonging cancer drugs are being rationed. The debate relates to pre-exposure prophylaxis, PrEP, a highly effective antiretroviral drug which stops the virus being transmitted between partners where one is HIV positive. It has been called a game changer by AIDS charities as when taken consistently, PrEP has been shown to reduce the risk of HIV infection in people who are at high risk by more than 90%. However, studies show condom use falls among men taking the drugs, and critics suggest it will encourage promiscuity and risky lifestyles. The once-a-day pill costs around £100 a week per patient, and works by stopping the virus multiplying, so it cannot be transmitted. Supporters of the drug say that the short-term costs of the drug would be outweighed by millions saved should it mean a massive reductions in those diagnosed with the illness.